Hello and welcome to another SuccesSoul Conversations with me, Vicky Paul. I'm an intuitive, an artist and an author, and I'm passionate about personal transformation and development and believe that when we step into our own truth, we become who we were born to be. And I set up a series of conversations with people who have inspired me by their journey in the hope that you can learn something from them and their own journey. Stories help us understand who we are and reconnect with our sense of self and our place in the world. And this is why I've got these amazing guests from all different walks of life on the show to talk about their own journey, spiritual or otherwise. Today's guest is Nicola Humber, and I'm absolutely delighted to have her on because this lady does so much. She started off life in the finance industry, but has trained as a hypnotherapist and a coach and helps women in particular, but people who identify with her with her ethics, I guess is the best way of putting it, to live an unbound life. So we're going to find out what that actually means. And I'm going to let Nicola kind of introduce herself and just share a wee bit more about who she is at this point in time.
Who am I today? Who knows? Thanks, Vicky.
We change all the time, don't we? You know,
I know.
So many different heads and so many different hats that we juggle.
Someone asked me yesterday, I was doing an interview, he said, "Who is Nicola?" I'm like, I don't know.
No, neither do I. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Exactly. Right now, I mean, like you, I'm a writer. I think that's kind of my primary kind of identity, but also a publisher, founder of the Unbound Press, which kind of happened by accident, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, what I do is I help, like you say, primarily women to unbind themselves from all of these kind of limiting stories and rigid expectations about who and how we should be in the world, and to write from that place, to write their books from that unbound place, as I call it.
So were you always unbound? What were you like as a kid?
No. Well, probably, yeah. I think we all come into the world completely unbound, but very soon we start to pick up, like I said, these kind of ideas and stories and beliefs about how we should be, and
can you share a couple of these? Sorry to interrupt. And I've got a terrible habit of doing this because there's so many wonderful things that people talk about, and I'm like, oh, can you just expand that? So yeah, what are some of these limiting beliefs? What are some of these stories that people might connect with?
For me personally, and it's different for everyone, but for me, it was about kind of keeping quiet, holding back, like don't be your real self, like don't be too much. And a lot of stuff around being good enough, what I had to do to be good enough to be approved. I mean, like my first book is called Heal Your Inner Good Girl, and I very much was the archetypal good girl when I was growing up. I was the older sister, did really well at school, always got top marks, and kind of reveled in that role. I believed that's who I was. I was this kind of perfectionist, academic, quite shy, reserved.
Did that come from your family, your parents, your peers, or was that just something that was in you?
I guess it was in me to some degree. Like I do, I feel an element of it now, but it's in a way that serves me. So, just like being able to kind of figure things out and like being quite ambitious, I guess, like wanting to kind of grow and expand and like do my best at whatever I do. But it certainly got, I guess I had an overactive inner good girl when I was growing up. So yeah, there was a spark of it in me, absolutely. But it was very much kind of influenced, by my family and teachers. And, I think we pick up this stuff from society in general, it's just everywhere, these kind of ideas about how we need to be in order to gain approval and fit in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And we talked about this before we started recording. You know, we are absolutely aligned in this, in terms of the fact that there is a sort of, dependent on what society you live in, where you're listening to this and watching this around the world, there is a kind of formula for how you're supposed to live your life based on the sort of societal construct. You know, you go to school, you get a good education, you then perhaps go into university, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you get the house, the car, the family, the job. And so many people wake up in their 30s, 40s, 50s even, and they go, really? Mm-hmm. Where did that time go? And is this it? And often our life we haven't landed when we have this awakening where we thought we would be, and we'll kind of look back in our life and go, my God, this is not how I thought my life was going to turn out. And oftentimes that can have a profound impact on your life, and can end up in relationships ending, massive career changes, breakdowns, health implications. So this unbinding that you talk about, and I'd love you to explain what unbound means to you and how you sort of embody that word, because it means that it's loaded in so many different ways, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I have a really felt sense of what that word means. Like when I first saw the word, I was working through Danielle Laporte's desire map process. So I was tuning into my core desired feelings. And when I did this, probably about kind of 7 years ago. So I was already on this unbound path, but I didn't identify it as that. But I knew that freedom was really important to me. So I was like, okay, that's one of my core desired feelings. But that word just didn't resonate deeply enough for me. I couldn't feel it. So I was looking for other words that meant like the same or a similar thing, and came across the word unbound. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yes, that's the one. That's the one that does it. And for me, it's that sense that something has previously been bound. And that's how I felt. I felt that I'd been kind of bound by this good girl role that I'd played, for a lot of my life in different ways. I talked about when I was really little, but, that kind of led on into the rest of my life, like going to university, getting the proper job in finance, which, my inner good girl, she loved that because there was a really clear path. There were different exams and everything, she could definitely play that game. But I felt so restricted. So when I connected with the word unbound, it's like, yes, like my idea of freedom has to kind of express the idea that something had been restricted previously. So that's what it means to me. And it's this continual process of unbinding. I noticed that.
You think if something's bound, it's not just once round. If you think of,
it's not.
I have an image in my head of something around my hands, and it's just this binding, and it's just constantly over time releasing, which really is a great analogy for a spiritual journey, because it's not the awakening and all of a sudden everything's right and fine with the world. It's a constant journey, and you still get presented challenges, but you just get far more used to, okay, it's another challenge, and it doesn't dunk you as much. But what I'd love to do is just to go back to this time when you were in finance, and clearly something must have happened, whether it was an event, a period of time, through your work or personal, that you thought, okay, well, this ain't working anymore. Because these conversations are based on my book, How to Be Successful. And there's 3 stages as I experienced my sort of awakening or transformation or part of my journey. And the first one is about the understanding. And it's that point in our life when we go, okay, and it's the flip, it's the contradiction. The universe loves a contradiction. I do not understand my life. I don't understand where I am. But it's the point where you just go, okay, enough's enough. So what was that for you? What was the event? If you want to share specifics, that would be great. And how were you mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually? What was that all, or how did that all present itself?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, I quite enjoyed, or I thought I enjoyed that, that role in finance. And I was working for a company, and it was very social. You know, we'd go out for like drinks and like different insurance companies and investment companies would entertain us. You know, there was a part of me that really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed kind of the work of like managing people's money and helping them with that. So for a while I was like, yeah, this is great, this is what I'm going to do. But I got to my kind of early to mid-30s and just started, I don't know, started feeling like this listlessness is the word. You know, some days I just couldn't get up and go into the office. I would be there and I just found it really hard to kind of just be in that space, like 9 to 5. I couldn't really see what my future was going to be. It's like, well, it was that kind of thing of like, is this it? I had a couple of relationships that were really kind of destructive and toxic, and it was like, what is going on? You know, this is not me, but there's obviously a part of me that's playing out in some way. And I actually got headhunted. The company I worked with, it was all of the other financial advisors were men, and I got headhunted by this company, which was 2 women who'd started up their own firm of independent financial advisors, and like wanted me to go and work with them. And I was like, yeah, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the change I need. And pretty much the day I started there was the day that the financial crash in 2008 just started. Like, that was literally my first day, and it was like, oh, what is going on? You know, we had clients ringing up, and I think that was a sign. And I knew pretty shortly, not because of the financial crash, but just like being in that office again, I was doing that work. I was like, I can't do this. I just can't do this anymore. I literally felt so restricted and stifled.
I'm kind of jumping ahead, but for a purpose of clawing back, you talk about at the moment what you do is to help to build a soul family, you know, through clients and readers. Were you spiritual? I mean, we're all spiritual, but would you have considered yourself a spiritual person during those years as a good girl in the financial industry? And if you were, and you did, was there evidence of other spiritual people within the financial industry, or was it something that was just like, nah, these two worlds just collide?
I mean, I believe we all are, you know, we all are. And I definitely think I had great kind of spiritual teachers in that environment, you know, through the lessons that I learned. I don't think...
Oh, they were though, did they?
No, I don't know. Like, looking back, I don't know if like anyone who I was with at that time working would identify as spiritual. And I don't even know if I would. You know, I was always interested in like alternative therapies, and I read a lot. You know, I trained as a reflexologist like way back, and you know, I was interested in that kind of thing, but I think it's a part of me that I'd really pushed aside and pushed down. And it definitely wasn't something that was spoken about in the circles that I mixed.
Which is interesting, because I read somewhere, particularly after the crash, that, you know, it's so much of the city, and I talk about London as the city, the financial centre of the UK, you know, they were turning to the likes of Kabbalah and all manner of different sort of spiritual practices and processes to find some form of understanding, solace, meaning. And also in London at that time, the appointments to see psychics and tarot readers went through the roof, and Harrods ended up, I think it was Harrods or Harvey Nichols or Selfridges, so one of the big stores ended up having a whole load of sort of tarot card readers come in to help with the demand. All from the financial industry and the financial sector. And I just find it interesting when I read your bio and that you worked in the financial sector. I was like, I'm going to speak to Nicola about this, because it just seems it's one of these perfect examples of something that's, you know, so human. You know, the sort of currency and finances is such a human part of our time on earth, and everybody that was in it is like, oh my god, this, they're the ones that were kind of searching for the spiritual things. It's maybe that's a great possibility for clients.
Maybe it is. I mean, it may have changed a lot since then. Who knows? Maybe they're all like spiritual.
Certainly using life coaches anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they all have a really strong spiritual practice now. I don't know. What I do know is, certainly in the last couple of years when I was working in that environment, there was a lot of stuff going on, like, huge life events for a lot of the people that I worked with, like really serious illnesses. People have it. There was a lot of conflict, like there was a lot going on. And at the time it was like, what on earth? This is like, must be a really toxic environment. But I feel it was this kind of, maybe it was each person being called to be their true selves and to, find their way onto a more spiritual path. I'm not sure. It's quite interesting to think about.
You had this sort of financial crash and life crash at the
same time.
Job. What happened after that? Because obviously that transformed the industry at the time. What happened to you? What was your kind of next move?
Well, I had no idea what I wanted to do, Vicky, really. I would literally go out of the office every day. Our office was like opposite this park. I would go and sit in the park, have my lunch, and just ask the question, what am I going to do? Because I had no clue whatsoever.
Did you get a response?
I did. Not in the way, I think sometimes we think we're going to ask that question and it will come immediately as this insight. It wasn't quite like that, but very soon after, I started asking the question, I went to a health spa for the weekend with my sister, and we went to see a demonstration by a hypnotherapist, which was really odd. It's not the kind of thing I would normally do. I'd never experienced hypnotherapy, wasn't interested in it at all. But a part of me obviously was, because we ended up going to this demonstration. And it was a very kind of eccentric, like older woman who was doing this demonstration. And she was talking about Dr. Masaru Emoto, his work with ice crystals. How, like, if you speak positive words to the ice crystals or play lovely music, they were really beautiful. And if you kind of spoke negative words to them, they would be all like deformed. And just something in what she said and how she was saying it, it just really landed with me. And I thought, okay, I think this is what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to kind of retrain as a hypnotherapist. So now I can look back and go, well, look, that was my kind of intuition kicking in. But then at that time, it just felt like this sense of, it was just like the sign that I was looking for, I guess. And I was so desperate to see it. So I made the decision, like really soon after that, I started researching different places where I could train in hypnotherapy. Made the decision to leave my job. They thought I was absolutely crazy. They were like, what are you going to do? I got a part-time job to support myself and went through this process of retraining. And I thought, okay, I'm going to set up a hypnotherapy practice. And that'll be it. That'll be me, seeing clients, one-to-one. And that's my life sorted. But really, that was very much the beginning of the journey, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens, and I'm saying, I think, for everybody that I speak to in these, off camera and on camera, and in my own experience, that is really what happens. When I first started on this path, although like you, always interested in spirituality and the bigger question of why we were here, and actually listened to Deepak Chopra on cassette. That's how long ago that was.
I love it.
Yeah. And I trained as a yoga teacher because I'd practiced yoga all my life. My mum was heavily into yoga, so I'd always done it. And I thought, okay, well, I'm meant to be a yoga teacher. So I went into yoga teaching. And it's always interesting when I speak to guests on the show, how many different skills they have and how many different things that they've trained under the sort of mystical arts umbrella. And such an expressive toolkit that all comes in. But it's obviously everybody's journey just to sort of peel away the layers of the onion, just to find out, gently you're moving into this different energy and understanding what that means to you. So the hypnotherapy business didn't quite kick off the way you had potentially thought. What happened?
Well, it did. I mean, I did okay. And I mean, I had no clue how to run a business, to be honest. And I remember as part of the training, I mean, it was a really amazing course and program that I did in terms of the hypnotherapy skills. And then it was like the last weekend that we did, I think they did half a day on like how to set up your practice and run a business. And like, clearly that is not enough.
No. For anyone watching who's setting up a business, it takes years.
It does, and that's a transformational process in itself, which I learned. But no, I set up my practice. I started seeing clients, and to be honest, at the beginning, most of the people coming to me, I worked with a range of issues, but the main thing was weight loss. People wanted me to help them lose weight. And I would find whenever I was working, it was primarily women, I would be there thinking, yeah, but you're amazing. You don't need to change. So it would all kind of come back to self-love and self-acceptance. I don't know if I did like the best job at helping them to lose weight. I'm just interested in it did happen quite often, as a side effect.
That's just a physical manifestation of self-worth, isn't it? So you were clearly, finding different ways for them to feel worthy and valid, and
that's what I was interested in. And, when I first started to find out about kind of the online side of business, I was like, I could do this online. And coaches would say to me, well, what's your niche? What do most people come to you for? And I was like, well, I guess it's weight loss. So like my first ever online program that I did was around weight loss. But again, it was all like weight loss, but it was all about self-love. And that's how I started to move into the online kind of space. And my business started to evolve. I personally had to do a lot of work around my money mindset. Like, even though I'd been involved in the finance industry, I realized I had all of this stuff around money. And I think that all comes to the surface when you run your own business.
So many people have got issues around money, and particularly if you've moved from a career where you've had salary, and it's been something that's just come month by month by month, and then when you have to take yourself out of that position and you become self-employed, there's this whole thing goes on, and I definitely feel that part of the sort of spiritual reasons behind coronavirus and this issue around money, just the global financial crisis, for want of a better expression, and our own personal challenges around money and self-worth and the furlough and losing jobs, it's a sort of, for me, there's something bigger about self-worth and about disconnecting our sense of worth with what we earn, what we can spend, the material value of life, because we are taught, success tends to be, generally speaking, in the Western world, evidenced by the financial side of things, how big your house is, how good your job is, your car, your clothes, etc., etc. And that's really not the case. And I talk about this in my book, that success actually meant, when we first sort of invented the word way back in the 15th century, it was about going near to. The outcome could be good or bad, in inverted commas, but it was about going near to. So it's changed as language does over time to mean something completely different. And I believe that original meaning is still in us. And this is where this confusion comes from. However, we're driven by this desire to have bigger, better, more. So it's interesting that we've all had to get rid of the bigger, better, more through COVID and lockdown.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see how this will unfold as we start to come out of lockdown in the UK. I mean, obviously, depending on where you're listening and watching to this, you might not still be in lockdown, but we still are.
Yes, we are.
Anyway, so I digress. So these issues came up around your sense of self-worth and money. So which is ironic and a contradiction given your job.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's like the universe loves to play these little jokes on us.
Totally. Yeah.
I was like, okay. So I actually, I did a lot of work for myself. I actually, for quite a time in my business, that's what I supported other primarily women in business with their kind of money mindset. But still, it wasn't really lighting me up. And I wasn't really sure what I was meant to be doing with my work. And I remember I got to a time, I think it was back in 2015, and like everything, there was a month where everything just dried up in my business. Everything stopped, no new clients, like existing clients had like finished or, just drifted away. And I was just in this space and I'm like, well, what am I meant to do? Maybe I'm not meant to have my own business, maybe I should go back and get a job. But I think I was pretty much unemployable by that time, to be honest.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody I know, she put a post out on Facebook saying that she was offering angel readings. And I was like, okay, I've never had an angel reading before, but I feel like I need to do this. So I went to see, it was Isabel Gatherer. She's amazing. And she started to tune into the angels. And the very first thing that came through was, have you written your book yet? You need to write your book. And I was like, oh. And we were talking about it afterwards. I was talking about it with Izzy. And I was like, I have been thinking about writing a book. I'd always been a writer ever since I was a little girl. I love writing. I was blogging a lot in my business. And I had kind of a couple of times I'd started to write a book, but I drifted away from it, got kind of caught up with something else. And I was like, well, I think actually this is the time. So it was that day when I actually made the commitment. Yes, I'm going to write my first book. And a couple of days later, I didn't know what it would really be about. But a couple of days later, I was out for a walk and the title, Heal Your Inner Good Girl, just dropped in. And I was like, okay, I can work with that. And I did, I made the commitment. As soon as I made that decision, actually, like my business started to pick up again. It's almost like the space had been created to make sure I got this message and listen to it.
And that's a really great lesson for anyone listening and watching this, is that you probably went into a bit of panic mode when business stopped, clients stopped. Yeah. As somebody who's been self-employed for years, I kind of get that. It took me about 8 years to go, it'll be fine, the business will come. But I was squirreling money away in the bank just in case. But that's a really interesting and very vivid and valid evidence of when something happens, try and take a step back from it, because there's a reason something is going on. You were given the space because you were sort of hell-bent on building this business, and there was no opportunity for the universe, your body, for your intuition to speak to you. And if you're not creating that space on a daily basis through meditation or whatever works for you, the universe is going to step in and create it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can either make the space yourself or deal with the ramifications of not. So that's great that came through to you. So tell us what happened once that book started to download. Did it just come through you, or what was the process like?
It pretty much did come through me. I mean, I had no clue how to write a book. And so I was looking for advice out there. And a lot of it was like, oh, you have to have it all mapped out, have a really clear plan, have all your chapters. And but that didn't really, I tried to do that. And again, like my good girl was like, yes, okay, that's how I need to do it. But that didn't work for me. So I really just had to show up at the page and see what wanted to come through. And it started to take form. And actually that first book came through pretty quickly over a period of about 6 months, really.
Did you find that there was a process of trust involved, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So literally just that, because I remember, and mine happened very similar. I just did a brain dump of, at the time I thought it was a workshop, but the title, How to Be Successful, came to me. And and it was a workshop, and it latterly became a book. But I was very much the same. It just kind of, okay, I'm sitting waiting. What am I going to write?
Exactly.
And it was literally, okay, I'm just going to not think about what I'm going to write. I'm just going to start the words that come into my head. And I had been a radio presenter for many years before that. And I always remember explaining to somebody, because they would say, where do you get your ideas from? And I have no idea. I don't know what I'm going to say until the word is out my mouth. Because we had a producer, and he was like, you need to tell us what you're going to say. And I'm like, I don't know. It just comes. And I didn't realize at the time that I was channeling, and I was just in that sort of intuitive flow. And that creative flow, which is the same as you. And a lot of authors that you speak to, and a lot of writers, it's the same thing. It's that process of just writing. And I want to just briefly digress. Do you think because we don't write anymore, as in write, we are always typing or on the computers, and it's a completely different process? Do you think the fact that we don't write anymore, that physical process, is that we can't connect, or we find it difficult or struggle to connect in that writing way?
I mean, I always handwrite. If I'm writing a book or, I'm creating something, I always write it by hand first, because that's occasionally I will just go straight to typing something out, but no, I need that sense of connection, like the pen on the page. And I always encourage, like, the writers I work with, to find your own way. Don't do something that doesn't feel good, but like, that can be a really good place to start, because there's just a deeper sense of connection, I feel, when we're doing that. And we are so used to looking at screens, like, even more so over the past year, since we haven't really been able to do anything else apart from be online, and I just think it can just be such a welcome relief just to kind of come to the page.
And I think you were right in saying, don't follow other people's process of how you write a book. And I was the exact same as you. I was like, how do you write a book? And it was the same thing. Get your chapters, put sticky notes, and do a diagram on the wall. Just brain dump onto the page. I listened to a podcast called the Beautiful Writers Podcast, and every single author, and she's interviewed Elizabeth Gilbert, Marianne Williamson, the big guns, and they all say their first drafts is awful. So the first draft's not going to be the best, but it's about just getting it out of you in whatever order it comes out.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be like this really neat and tidy linear process. You don't write your book from start to finish necessarily. It kind of can come out all over the place, and then like you can look at what you've got and start working with that. But I think if you can like allow yourself to be in this really free place for as long as possible during the writing process, that's when the magic happens, because we don't know what our books are going to look like, and it's good not to know at the beginning, because then it leaves space for, like I say, the magic to happen.
What did you not so much learn about yourself from a life journey point of view? Because that's, people say if your book never gets published, it's a very cathartic process. It's a healing process if you're writing whatever the story is, because our first book is always written about what we know. It's us coming out. But what did you learn? I'm going to open it up, generally speaking, about, or not about anything, but what did you learn through that process?
Definitely, like, trust, as you said, like, even more deeply, like, to trust what was coming through and how it was coming through, and just to follow that rather than try to kind of like force it in any way. Also, like, the power of making a really clear commitment to something. So the fact that I, like I said, I'd started to write a book a few times before, but that really clear commitment wasn't there. Whereas this time it felt very different. I knew in my bones that this is what I was doing, like, however challenging it might get. And I've like experienced that and seen that over and over again since, like, when we make that really kind of clear and true kind of commitment to writing a book or whatever it is, it creates like this energetic container within which it can take form. So I really saw that.
How did you diarise? Sorry to interrupt. Just this is for anybody watching, because given this is not only you've written 3 books, you've got a publishing company. So anybody watching who is interested in exploring whether they have a book in them or not, it's great to get insight into this. And I've forgotten my question. What was I going to ask you? I'm going through the menopause and my brain just goes off on a tangent.
Me too. I'm so with you.
Yeah. And a really, really profound and interesting question I was going to ask you. And then it's just like, okay, it's completely gone.
Something about diarising.
Yes, thank you. Sometimes it could be, people come up with excuses. We all do. I'm too busy. I'm too tired. I've got kids. I've got a husband. I've got, homeschooling. I've got all this stuff going on. How did you focus and did you set aside time every day, or did you commit to every week you're going to write 1,000 words, or how did you commit? What did the physical commitment look like?
I think quite near the beginning of the process, or maybe even before I started writing, I'd seen something from Liz Gilbert actually, where she talked about like just taking 30 minutes every day. She said you can write a book in 30 minutes a day. You don't need all of this time. So I gave myself permission just to spend 30 minutes a day on my book. And if that's all I did, that was enough. And I also got an accountability buddy. Another one of my friends was working on her first book. And she was like, do you want to just kind of buddy up and keep each other accountable? So we would check in once a week, and that really kept me going. But yeah, I didn't have this expectation that I would spend hours writing every day, because I don't operate that way. So I would just show up for a small amount of time every single day for my book, and Monday to Friday. And that's how it got written, and again, I think it's all about finding your own way, and also recognizing, we're cyclical beings. We're not meant to be we're not meant to feel the same or want to do this things in the same way every day. So allowing your own ebbs and flows is really important.
Yeah, it's good. As you said, accountability buddy. I've always worked for myself and I've always got that discipline, but I did it the opposite way from you. I brain dumped the first 3 chapters in a 10,000 word book proposal, and then didn't look at it for a year. And then, I'd got the publishing deal, went, oh my God, I've got 3 months to finish this.
Yeah.
Did do nothing, and then I'd sit in front and I'd be on it for 8 hours. So whatever works for you,
exactly.
You have to have some kind of timeline in place. For me, it was the deadline of when I had to have the details to the publisher. But for you, it could be, okay, I'm going to get this done by my birthday, or by Christmas, or by the end of the summer. However you manifest that, just roll with it, So it's always keen to hear different people's experiences. So you got your first book out, and then you found a publisher.
Well, I self-published the first one completely. Yeah, Heal You're in a Good Girl, because, to be honest, I was really impatient. Once I'd written it, I just wanted to get it out there. So I was like, I'm gonna self-publish, and it felt like a bit of an anticlimax, actually, for me. I was like, oh, okay, that's. My book's out there now. What next?
I'm so glad you said that. I listened to an interview with Seth Godin, and it was such a. I mean, he's a genius. And he said, when he got his book, it wasn't quite like nah. It was kind of like, okay, that's it. And when I was expecting these, I've got my book. It's going to be amazing, and it was just kind of like. I remember opening and going, okay, that's my book. And I don't know whether that's because I always knew that I was going to write the book and it wasn't this surprise, or whether that's just my personality. I've never been somebody, I mean, I get the most excited I get now is when somebody buys one of my paintings. That I've created something, and it's come out and through me, and somebody's connected with it in such a way that they're prepared to buy it and hang it in their sacred space. That so excites me. But I was kind of like, with the book. So also be aware.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know, because I always get really excited for other people, like the Unbound Press authors. Every time it's one of their release days, I get so excited. But I know, like, we've just released our first collaborative book, and we did a Facebook Live with all of the contributors. And just before, like, one of them, she was like, is anyone else just feeling really shit today? Because, it was her first time being in a published book. But she was just like, I'm just like feeling awful, like I'm not feeling good about it, and there was stuff coming up around visibility, but sometimes we don't feel great, or we feel a bit flat when our books come out. But it's not about that release day or even like the months afterwards. Like, these books have a lifetime. And actually, Heal Your Inner Good Girl was out be 5 years this year ago, and it's selling more copies now than it ever has done. It's selling more copies than either of my two more recent books. So, don't think just because it feels a bit anticlimactic when you release your book that's it. Like, your book will go on to have a life of its own.
Yeah, we talked about this. It's a very, the process of writing a book's a humbling experience. The process of publishing, and I got a publisher for mine, but the process, it was really tricky. We'll just leave it at that. The whole experience was not at all what I expected it to be. There were so many hiccups and delays and challenges. And then, I logged into the distribution company's details for the first time, because you don't get the book sales for the first 3 months. And people are always saying, how many books you sold? How many books you sold? And I was so disappointed when I saw the numbers, because I was like, what? That's rubbish. And again, Seth Godin, wise man, said, because in my vision board, I'm a New York Times bestseller and da-da-da-da. And he was like, I don't, if my book has affected the lives and changed the lives of 1,000 people, job done. Job done. Yeah. We've got this expectation that is, again, societal, and we spoke going back earlier on about how life is this spiritual unfolding is a constant unfolding, a constant journey. I should know that helping the lives of one person's an amazing thing to do. But I still have this ego mind that goes, I want to be on the New York Times bestseller list. I want the big ticket stuff. And I might get that, but it's not necessarily going to happen in my time. And that's the thing about the book and writing a book. It's a total leveler, and as you say, it could be, it's out there and it could do nothing for years. It's not a money-making scheme. And I guess the energy around the book that you have, will dictate what type of success you have.
Yeah, exactly. And you never know what they're going to lead to. When I'm working with writers, I'm always saying, it's not about the book sales necessarily. It's about what you create around the book and what doors it can open for you, what it might lead to, both through the writing process and also the publishing process. I mean, if I hadn't written Heal Your Inner Good Girl, and then like very soon afterwards, that led to writing Unbound, my second book. And that's what led to the Unbound Press. And I never even, like, the thought of having a publishing company was never on my radar at all. And it literally, like, the year that I was writing Unbound, I was working with a mentor. She's incredibly intuitive. And she kept saying, Nicola, I just keep getting these images of you, like, writing workshops and helping, like, people to write their books. And I'm like, no, that's not me. Like, I'm kind of barely finding my way writing my own books. I don't know how I could help others. And then it was through releasing Unbound. I met up with Sean of That Guy's House to, like, talk through the release plans. And he'd read the book and he's like, Nicola, I can see you doing this and helping other women to write their books, and you'd have your own publishing imprint, and it would be like something like the Unbound Press. And when he said those words, again, I just felt this sense of knowing in my body, like every cell just went, yes. And it's like, okay, that's what I'm meant to do. But
which is interesting, because when you first started this journey from 2008, when you had that job, opened up on the day of the crash, and then you went to that retreat and you had hypnotherapist, and it just resonated.
Yeah.
And you've kind of gone hypnotherapist to publisher.
I know.
It's a squiggly journey. I just want to jump back a wee bit, because you said, we've talked about, or rather you talked about how a book, it's not just about the finances. And you talk about on your website, there's 4 different ways that writing a book can supercharge your business. Can you please share what these are?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first one I think is through the book writing process, you discover so much about who you are and like that unique medicine that you're here to share. Like, I think sometimes we think, oh, I have to wait for all the clarity before I start writing. No, start writing and you will get so much clarity. So that's like the first thing. It helps you. Yeah, go on.
I've just said, poo. If you are, I love the fact, what is your unique medicine that you're sharing? I love that. Some people say, how are you here to serve?
Yeah.
What are you here to give? And these are, I just love, what is your medicine? Because that just has, just like words, as we talk about, we're both writers, it just drops in and makes me think, okay, if you are setting up in some form of business, or you're looking to change direction and write a book, not that you're trying to heal, but how are you trying to support someone else's journey? What is it you've got to give, and what is your medicine? I love that. Sorry, it's
okay. I love it. I get excited too when I'm listening to something like, hang on. So that's the first way, like the clarity it gives you. The second way is, I think it gives you this confidence when you're writing a book, and when you've written a book, when it's out in the world, like it kind of elevates, like people talk about it elevating your status. And I think it does, like generally, but it does that for yourself, because like, as we've been talking about, writing a book and publishing a book can be incredibly challenging. And if you've, allowed yourself to go through that, and you've managed to actually do it and get it out into the world, it gives you this sense of confidence that infuses your work then, and it attracts people to you. So that's the second way, confidence. The third way, 3, is what it leads to. What we were just talking about. I'm not saying that everyone's going to start their own publishing company, but it's a way of attracting opportunities to you, which might be like speaking engagements, or opportunities to do things like this, Vicky, podcasts, collaborations, co-creation. So it can open the door to all sorts of things that maybe you wouldn't kind of see or receive if you hadn't been through the book writing process. And 4, I kind of think there's more than 4 now, to be honest. Is it can provide a foundation for everything else you create in your business. Like Unbound and Heal You're in a Good Girl, like both of those books, they infuse everything else I offer now, whether it's the Unbound Press or my Unbound Writing Mastermind. And I can just always go back to those books, and my latest one, Unbound Writing, if I'm feeling a bit flat and I just like, well, what am I going to talk about? What do I want to be sharing? Just open your book and, pick a page and start from there. And I forget that sometimes. I'm like, thinking about the new things that I want to create and forgetting what's already there. So that's
so much of it is it's not regurgitated, but it's the same things that we are sharing and talking about. I mean, it's not rocket science. I think there's 5 or 6 things that challenge us in life. There's infinite ways of how that presents itself based on you, your circumstances, etc. But it's the same kind of stuff we're talking about. But that's why it's so important for people to share their stories, because there's 7 billion, give or take, people on the planet that all are here for a reason. They are here, we're all here to support one another in one capacity or another. And if you don't resonate with what I say or what Nicola says, you're going to resonate with what somebody else says. And we do that through the sharing of stories. It's the same sort of problems we're fixing or challenges we're overcoming, just wrapped up in a different way, which is fascinating. And I mean, I could talk to you forever.
I know.
Interesting. It's brilliant. if somebody wants to come and work, and this, we've kind of moved through the process in the stage of the conversation, and I guess the payoff is we've kind of done that as well. It's just molded beautifully.
Yes.
If people, want to write a book, what kind of tips can you give them? Can you offer some sort of initial guidance or sort of wisdom in terms of taking that leap, taking that step forward, and then also off the back of that, how can they get in touch with you? Are you accepting submissions? How does that process work?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think we've talked about some of the ways to get started. Have naturally come through in the conversation. It is about, like, I would say, if you're feeling the call to write a book, that is no accident. Like, listen, because I think we can brush it aside for a long time. So making that commitment, that really clear commitment, and just kind of come to the page, like start writing, just asking the question, what is it that's wanting to come through me, and just write from that place. And you can think about like your reader and the kind of journey. If you think of your book as a journey, it's like, what's the journey I want to take my reader on? That can help you to create a kind of fluid structure, but also...
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's interesting. Did you start with the reader in mind rather than the story?
No, I didn't. And people write in different ways. Sometimes people find it helpful to have a sense of that. I was just going to say, actually, like, you can have a sense of the reader journey, but almost the more important thing is to think about your story and the stories that, you're feeling called to bring through and put in the book. So you can put those two things together, like the reader journey and your stories, like where they fit on the reader's journey. But I would say to always put more of yourself into your book than maybe feels comfortable.
Yeah, which is interesting. I was going to say that to you, because how much of your own personal experience do you put in? I am an open book. I share everything. That's just always been the way I am, a bit of an oversharer, which can be kind of tricky when it involves other family members and friends. And how do you deal with that? Because I've spoken to a number of different authors, and a lot of them have not, their family haven't read their book, or they haven't shared it because it's kind of like, oh, that's really awkward, because it's my interpretation of the journey. Your mum, your dad, your sister, your brother, your wife, blah, 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 might not have that same interpretation. How do you have anything to say around that? Do you have any kind of guidance around people in terms of sharing that?
I mean, I would always, if you feel that's likely to be an issue, or other people might have interpreted things differently, those that you're close to, or not close to, actually. I mean, I would always say something like that at the beginning of the book, like, this is my version of events. This is my story and my perception of it. There may be other people who have experienced it differently, but I'm obviously writing from my own perspective. So I would really own that, like, at the beginning of the book. And also, some of the writers that I've worked with have had really healing experiences, actually having conversations with loved ones about their book writing process and what's come up. So I think that's a really courageous thing to do if you can see it as a healing opportunity.
For everybody, not just the writer, for the people, involved in it, for sure. For sure. I remember, my mum sharing some of the stuff with my mum, and she was like, I didn't know this happened, or I didn't know you felt like that. So it's an interesting process, for sure.
Definitely is.
And it's just to go back to, and I just digress very momentarily, but if you feel called for anything, there's a reason you're called for it. And we talked about this at the beginning about self-worth and a sense of worth. It's our sense of self-worth that knocks us and says, no, you're not to be an artist, a writer, whatever it is that you're being called to be or called to do. So do listen to that. You're absolutely right. So if people want to say, okay, right, I'm going to do this, how do they contact you? If they want to say, right, Nicola, I want to work with Nicola, do they have to write all the book? Do they have to write the first 3 chapters? Do they have to put this 10? I originally went to Hay House, and it was, you had to submit a 10,000 word proposal.
Yeah.
about the book and who the readers were and what the journey was going to be and how you were going to market it and what your PR campaigns were. I was like, oh my God, I have no idea. I don't even know what chapter 4 is about.
Exactly.
It's like, blah. So that was kind of an overwhelming experience for me, but that was my journey. So what's the journey like with Unbound Press?
Yeah, I mean, the best way, I mean, we speak to people at different stages of the journey. Like some people have pretty much got a finished manuscript, and that's, you know, we're interested in having conversations with you if that's the case. But I love personally to speak to someone right at the beginning of the journey, and it may be even before you've got like a clear sense of what the book is. We don't need a book proposal. Like the first step is just to have a conversation, and we'll kind of feel into whether there's a good fit and, you know, what's starting to come through for you around your book. But I mean, I love holding space for the whole journey. So like I said, if you're feeling the call and you're interested in exploring that, then yeah, I would just get in touch. And Amazing. You could do that either via the Unbound Press website or my own personal one as well.
Perfect. And I'll put all the details into the comments below. So if anybody wants to get in touch, just look at the comments below. And all sorts of different stories, or is there genres, etc., that you don't consider?
I mean, it's women authors or those who identify as women or who have been socialized as girls. That's who we work with. And it's books that activate some kind of transformation in their readers. So that could be, you know, we have had fiction books. They're primarily non-fiction, but they do need to be transformational in nature.
Wonderful. Listen, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your journey and for giving anybody listening and watching the opportunity to connect with you. You offer workshops. Your website is full of amazing content. You've got a podcast. Nicola's also got a radio show on Wellbeing Radio. So this woman is super busy and sharing lots of amazing information. So if you are interested in exploring what it is to write a book, then do get in touch with Nicola. And thank you again for coming on and chatting to us today. And thank you guys for listening and watching. Don't forget to subscribe and rate this little conversation. And also, if you want to find out who my other guests are, you can either have a hook about on my YouTube page, or if you're watching this through my website, then all the SuccesSoul Conversations have been uploaded on there. And as ever, if you want to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you. You can either connect with me on Instagram, Vicky J. Paul, or just pop me an email through the website. Take care. Much love.